this and put it on YouTube later?
Okay, cool.
That's not true.
You just tell me when to go.
Ready?
Go. Okay. My name is Corbin Hazley. I'm in the same class as you. And my presentation is on Dykes Magic City Trio. Dykes Magic City Trio was a three-part band from the Upper East Tennessee region that recorded in March of 1927 for the Brunswick Record Company. The leader of the band was John Dykes on the far left there on the fiddle. He was supported by Myrtle Vermillion on auto harp and vocals, as well as Hub Mahaffey on guitar. John Dykes was born in 1868, so he was at least one generation older than a lot of the other musicians who were recording in this era, as well as one or two generations older than the other two folks in his band. They had a really, really unique and distinct sound and were one of the most clean and powerful dance bands of that era. I mean, they did a lot more than just dance music, you know, just like breakdowns and things like that. But they were just one of the cleanest, most powerful bands of that era. And really, in some arguments, they could just be called a duet. We'll take a listen here, and I'll explain what I mean. Well, let's go ahead and listen to one of the first songs they recorded in New York on March 9th, 1927, called Cotton Eye Joe. Let's hope this works.
There's a volume on the other screen.
This screen.
Yeah. On the right bottom. On the face of the screen.
I've been married 40 years ago, and been far on Cotton Eye Joe. Cotton Eye Joe's a fine old man. One
Okay, so a little quick taste of the sound of Dykes Magic City Trio. So, why were they called the Magic City Trio? That's kind of an interesting name for a string band of the era, and it was something that stumped a lot of folklorists for a while and record collectors, because the Magic City was often the nickname of Birmingham, Alabama, because it was a planned city in the New South era. It was supposed to be a city of economic growth that would, come up as an industrial place. But in fact, rather than Birmingham, the Magic City was Kingsport, Tennessee. Kingsport was rechartered in 1917 as a planned city or a magic city because it was supposed to be a city that would pop up overnight, magically, to kind of be the in-between of raw natural resources in the hills of East Kentucky and Southwest Virginia, the coal, the timber, the iron ore, and the mills of the Carolinas, of the Piedmont, and even of the Upper East Tennessee region. So this band was kind of from the greater Kingsport area, you could say. Dykes was born near there. Vermillion was born just outside of Kingsport. And both Dykes and guitarist Hub Mahaffey worked in coal mines in and around Wise County, Virginia, kind of near Norton. The picture up here on the right is of Gate City, Virginia. That Gate City is just about 15 miles from Kingsport. That's where Myrtle Vermillion lived. So the band was of this region and brought a lot of different regional styles into one sound. Now, the reason that we know of Dykes Magic City Trio today was because the third week of February 1927, the Brunswick Record Company came to Norton, Virginia, town where I lived for 2 years, and they came to the Hotel Norton. Upper left-hand corner there is the Hotel Norton today. It's an office complex. But they came to the Hotel Norton, the date's uncertain, sometime in the end of February, and they were holding tryouts to find mountain talent, as they call it, to be taken up to New York to record, because, this is early 1927. We're still only just several years into the really big boom of hillbilly or Old Time Country Records. And this was at the same period that a lot of these companies were going out into the South to try and find talent. Now, allegedly that day, some sources say that there were 800 acts that came to try out. We know that's not true. It was probably closer to 150 or so. But only 2 acts were chosen from that day to be taken to New York. One was Dyke's Magic City Trio. The other was the banjo player named Doc Boggs on the bottom left there. He was from just outside of Norton. But Dyke's Magic City Trio and Boggs beat out some pretty hot talent from the area. Allegedly, the Carter family were there. So this is 4.5 months before they came to Bristol to record for Ralph Peer and Victor. Also, allegedly, Bird Moore, a regional guitarist who played with a whole bunch of bands and who at this point was about to record with Earl Johnson in 3 months, and also the Bull Mountain Moonshiners, the ancestors of Jim and Jesse McReynolds, who also recorded at the Bristol sessions later. So Dykes and Boggs beat out some pretty good local talent to get their chance at fame up in New York. So on the 5th day of March, 1927, Doc Boggs and Dyke's Magic City Trio were put up at the Hotel Norton, and the following morning were put on the 6 a.m. train to Ashland, Kentucky. It was a 3-day trip to get to New York, and that trip was pretty well accounted by some interviews done with Doc Boggs, as well as by letters that Myrtle Vermillion sent home to her family. And you can imagine for these folks going to a really big city for the first time. Mind you, Kingsport was a city, but was fairly small. Really, Johnson City was the biggest city around at that time. So for these folks, going up to New York was a pretty incredible experience. You know, they talk about how noisy it was and how it was the most incredible time of their life. John Dykes, however, probably didn't have too good of a time, because as soon as they got to New York, they were in Grand Central Station, and poor old John Dykes was robbed. A pickpocket came up, swiped his wallet, and robbed him of a solid $12, their travel expenses. So there's a bunch of neat stories that come from this trip, but don't have enough time to tell them all. But long story short, Dyke's Magic City Trio went into the studio on Wednesday, March the 9th, and recorded for 3 consecutive days. Over those 3 days, they laid down 14 tracks. Not too bad. What's even more impressive, especially for the era, is that all 14 of those tracks were released, which is really incredible and really important to us today. A lot of artists who went into the studios at this time, the executives and AR men would kind of pick and choose what they'd release. So you read through the catalogs and see all these interesting tunes that weren't released. But luckily, all of their songs were, including several gospel numbers, breakdowns, one popular song, and an old Tin Pan Alley love song as well. But I'm going to give you a really quick listen to a gospel song that they recorded. This song is the archetype for a bunch of gospel songs. Paul and Silas down in jail, Somebody Touch Me. A bunch of different gospel songs kind of stem from this one. Not only did they do breakdowns with dance calls and lyrical snippets, they also did harmonies. Pretty good harmonies in this.
Do Lord, do remember me. Oh, do Lord, do remember me. Do Lord, do remember me.
Alright. Keep trucking along. These are some interesting images. These were allegedly taken in New York. They probably went into a photo booth and had their pictures made. Hub on the left, John in the middle, and Myrtle on the right. John kind of looks like he just got robbed, doesn't he? He doesn't look too thrilled about it all. Once they returned home, it was another 3-day journey back from New York. Once they returned home, going all the way to New York City from Wise County or Sullivan County, Tennessee, was a big deal. And they were pretty well renowned through the area because of it. Accounts of their fame show up in the Kingsport Times, and, well, especially in the Big Stone Gap Post. For some reason, Wise County tried to kind of claim them because they had worked in the mines there. But the article on the left was from about March the 23rd, 1927. A neat little quote in there referring to John Dykes says, "He fiddles to perfection all the old tunes used for dances at the mountain homes, which are so vividly portrayed in the novels of John Fox Jr. when his characters go to their big shindigs." Kind of connecting the local culture to the pop culture of that era with John Fox Jr. Another one here on the right is later in that same year, July 27th, and it's advertising a dance, old-fashioned dance, Friday. Dykes' famous fiddler will furnish music. Whole lot of F's right there. J.R. Dykes of Kingsport, who is nationally known as an old-time fiddler, together with his associates, will furnish music for a genuine square dance at Pleasure Island Friday night. Sounds like the kind of place where I want to play. Mr. Dykes has just returned home from New York City, where several selections of his famous mountain music were recorded. I'll have to be quick here. Also, kind of a point of their fame, their songs were re-released by Brunswick throughout 27 and probably into 28 as well. That's the oldest release label on the left, newer one in the middle. And by May, the first week of May 1927, they were also released on a secondary label that Brunswick owned, Vocalion. And another neat little tidbit, 2 of their songs were released by Vocalion and Brunswick in Canada. 2 of their songs were released by the same company in Canada. So, you know, one could make a bit of an argument that they maybe had a little bit of international fame. Now, their music was very powerful, very driving, and very fluid too. Dykes' fiddling consists of a very rhythmic bowing style. I mean, he's not just finding melody. He's accenting his melody a whole lot with different bowings, different kind of trills, and he often tuned down a whole step, arguably to match the auto harp, because Myrtle Vermillion was playing a 3 or 5 bar auto harp. Some people believe that, but at any rate, he often cross-tuned. I think he only did 1 or 2 in standard tuning. And Hub also tuned down as well to meet him. Hub was a really strong guitar player, we're going to hear on this track. Some of his playing was done in more of a classical style, with a thumb pick and tension up. Some of it you can hear a real strong down brush. But let's take a quick listen to Callahan's Reel, my personal favorite. A lot of their songs are close to 130, 135 beats per minute, and just steady and really good time. Alrighty. Well, I don't have a whole lot of, well, in fact, I'm out of time. But Dykes' Magic City Trio was rediscovered kind of in the 60s and 70s, and their entire works was re-released on an LP by Old Homestead Records in 1987, and have been re-released ever since, and had a very strong impact on the music since, with such a very clean and powerful driving dance music. But any questions? Questions, comments? If you're throwing rotten fruit, take it out of the can.
How successful was that recording in New York? Like, seeing that old and released, was it successful?
Well, you mean them as a band, or their recordings themselves? Well,
both.
okay. Well, we know that they continued to play together probably up until about, I guess, about 1930. Some sources said up to about 1932. But other artists of the same region, several different groups, said that by about 1930, a lot of work slacked off in the music, obviously because of the Depression, also because about 1929, 1930, movies started getting sound. You know, they actually started having movies with dialogue and sound, so you didn't need a band in the theater And more people started going to the movies rather than going out to dances and things like that. So I'd say they probably stuck together playing until about 1930 or so. So they had several years of fame, as most did. I couldn't find any numbers of sales for their records. In 1927, for a country record to sell good, you know, even between 5,000 copies, 10,000 copies was a very good selling record. I'm not sure of exact figures, I couldn't find anything, but they were well known through the region. Hub Mahaffey continued playing with other groups, and he also played Hawaiian music, which was real popular at the time. Myrtle Vermillion continued playing and taught her daughter how to play auto harp. She passed away in 1970 and, you know, was an artist and a photographer and played music all her life. Dykes, being the elder, he passed away somewhere, I'm pretty sure around 1938, found different sources. But, you know, there's not a whole lot documenting the afterward. That's the tricky thing. But we do, I mean, they were renowned enough to show up in papers, newspapers, 3 counties away playing dances. So they did have some regional renown because.
All right, thank you. I think he says, let's have a dance now. Let's have a dance now.
Okay. Oh, I didn't make it.
Who's next? Chop chop.
Sorry.
Yep, okay.